Knowledge management. Knowledge management, KM, is the process of creating, sharing, using and managing the knowledge and information of an organization. It refers to a multidisciplinary approach to achieve organizational objectives by making the best use of knowledge. An established discipline since 1991, KM includes courses taught in the fields of business administration, information systems, management, library, and information sciences. Other fields may contribute to KM research, including information and media, computer science, public health and public policy. Several universities offer dedicated master's degrees in knowledge management. Many large companies, public institutions and non-profit organizations have resources dedicated to internal KM efforts, often as a part of their business strategy, IT, or human resource management departments. Several consulting companies provide advice regarding KM to these organizations. Knowledge management efforts typically focus on organizational objectives such as improved performance, competitive advantage, innovation, the sharing of lessons learned, integration and continuous improvement of the organization. These efforts overlap with organizational learning and may be distinguished from that by a greater focus on the management of knowledge as a strategic asset and on encouraging the sharing of knowledge. KM is an enabler of organizational learning. History. Knowledge management efforts have a long history, including on-the-job discussions, formal apprenticeship, discussion forums, corporate libraries, professional training, and mentoring programs. With increased use of computers in the second half of the 20th century, specific adaptations of technologies such as knowledge bases, expert systems, information repositories, group decision support systems, intranets, and computer-supported cooperative work have been introduced to further enhance such efforts. In 1999, the term personal knowledge management was introduced. It refers to the management of knowledge at the individual level. In the enterprise, early collections of case studies recognized the importance of knowledge management dimensions of strategy, process and measurement. Key lessons learned include people and the cultural norms which influence their behaviors are the most critical resources for successful knowledge creation, dissemination and application. Cognitive, social and organizational learning processes are essential to the success of a knowledge management strategy, and measurement, benchmarking and incentives are essential to accelerate the learning process and to drive cultural change. In short, knowledge management programs can yield impressive benefits to individuals and organizations if they are purposeful, concrete and action-orientated. Research. KM emerged as a scientific discipline in the early 1990s. It was initially supported by individual practitioners, when Skandia hired Leif Edvinsson of Sweden as the world's first chief knowledge officer, CKO. Hubert Sazontonge, formerly of CIBC, Canada, started investigating KM long before that. The objective of CKOs is to manage and maximize the intangible assets of their organizations. Gradually, CKOs became interested in practical and theoretical aspects of KM, and the new research field was formed. The KM idea has been taken up by academics, such as Ikujiro Nonaka, Hitotsubashi University, Hirotaka Takeuchi, Hitotsubashi University, Thomas H. Davenport, Babson College, and Baruch Lev, New York University. In 2001, Thomas A. Stewart, former editor at Fortune magazine and subsequently the editor of Harvard Business Review, published a cover story highlighting the importance of intellectual capital in organizations. The KM discipline has been gradually moving towards academic maturity. First, is a trend toward higher cooperation among academics. Single-author publications are less common. Second, the role of practitioners has changed. Their contribution to academic research declined from 30% of overall contributions up to 2002, to only 10% by 2009. Third, the number of academic knowledge management journals has been steadily growing, currently reaching 27 outlets. Multiple KM disciplines exist, approaches vary by author and school. As the discipline matured, academic debates increased regarding theory and practice, including Regardless of the school of thought, core components of KM roughly include people/culture, processes/structure and technology. The details depend on the perspective. KM perspectives include: the practical relevance of academic research in KM has been questioned, with action research suggested as having more relevance, and the need to translate the findings presented in academic journals to a practice. Dimensions. Different frameworks for distinguishing between different types of knowledge exist. One proposed framework for categorizing the dimensions of knowledge distinguishes tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge. Tacit knowledge represents internalized knowledge that an individual may not be consciously aware of, such as to accomplish particular tasks. At the opposite end of the spectrum, explicit knowledge represents knowledge that the individual holds consciously in mental focus, in a form that can easily be communicated to others. Ikujiro Nonaka proposed a model, SISI, for socialization, externalization, combination, internalization, which considers a spiraling interaction between explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge. In this model, knowledge follows a cycle in which implicit knowledge is extracted to become explicit knowledge, and explicit knowledges are internalized into implicit knowledge. Hayes and Walsham, 2003, describe knowledge and knowledge management as two different perspectives. The content perspective suggests that knowledge is easily stored, because it may be codified, while the relational perspective recognizes the contextual and relational aspects of knowledge which can make knowledge difficult to share outside the specific context in which it is developed. Early research suggested that KM needs to convert internalized tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge to share it, and the same effort must permit individuals to internalize and make personally meaningful any codified knowledge retrieved from the KM effort. Subsequent research suggested that a distinction between tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge represented an oversimplification, and that the notion of explicit knowledge is self-contradictory. Specifically, for knowledge to be made explicit, it must be translated into information, i.e., symbols outside our heads. More recently, together with Georg von Krock and Sven Whirlpool, Nonaka returned to his earlier work in an attempt to move the debate about knowledge conversion forward. A second proposed framework for categorizing knowledge dimensions distinguishes embedded knowledge of a system outside a human individual. For example, an information system may have knowledge embedded into its design, from embodied knowledge representing a learned capability of a human body's nervous and endocrine systems. A third proposed framework distinguishes between the exploratory creation of new knowledge, i.e., innovation, versus the transfer or exploitation of established knowledge within a group, organization, or community. Collaborative environments such as communities of practice or the use of social computing tools can be used for both knowledge creation and transfer. Strategies. Knowledge may be accessed at 3 stages: before, during, or after KM-related activities. Organizations have tried knowledge capture incentives, including making content submission mandatory and incorporating rewards into performance measurement plans. Considerable controversy exists over whether such incentives work, and no consensus has emerged. One strategy to KM involves actively managing knowledge, push strategy. In such an instance, individuals strive to explicitly encode their knowledge into a shared knowledge repository, such as a database, as well as retrieving knowledge they need that other individuals have provided, codification. Another strategy involves individuals making knowledge requests of experts associated with a particular subject on an ad hoc basis, pull strategy. In such an instance, expert individuals provide insights to requester, personalization. Hansen et al. Defined the 2 strategies. Codification focuses on collecting and storing codified knowledge in electronic databases to make it accessible. Codification can therefore refer to both tacit and explicit knowledge. In contrast, personalization encourages individuals to share their knowledge directly. Information technology plays a less important role, as it only facilitates communication and knowledge sharing. Other knowledge management strategies and instruments for companies include motivations. Multiple motivations lead organizations to undertake KM. Typical considerations include KM technologies. Knowledge management, KM, technology can be categorized. These categories overlap. Workflow, for example, is a significant aspect of a content or document management systems, most of which have tools for developing enterprise portals. Proprietary KM technology products such as Lotus Notes defined proprietary formats for email, documents, forms, etc. The Internet drove most vendors to adopt Internet formats. Open source and freeware tools for the creation of blogs and wikis now enable capabilities that used to require expensive commercial tools. KM is driving the adoption of tools that enable organizations to work at the semantic level, as part of the semantic web. Some commentators have argued that after many years the semantic web has failed to see widespread adoption, while other commentators have argued that it has been a success. Knowledge barriers. Just like knowledge transfer and knowledge sharing, the term knowledge barriers is not a uniformly defined term and differs in its meaning depending on the author. Knowledge barriers can be associated with high costs for both companies and individuals.